Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Software Plaza podcast. I'm Twain Taylor, editor at Software Plaza, and I bring you a new conversation almost every week as we talk to founders, CTOs, marketing heads, product heads, DevRel, just people who are in the trenches building stuff in the cloud native space. That really gets us excited. And Today, I'm happy to be talking with Qasim, who is the VP of Engineering at Kubermatic. That's Kubermatic, and the website is kubermatic.com if you want to check them out. It's not the first time we're having someone from Kubermatic on the show. We had their CEO, Sebastian Schiel, last year around this time. And so we wanted to circle back and get them back on again. And so Moat obliged this time. And so I'm really excited to be chatting with him about what's happening at Kubermatic. The topic is going to be just virtualization and Kubernetes, the intersection of that. So quite excited to get into this. Moat, welcome to the Software Plaza podcast. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Taylor. That's actually a great pleasure for me to be here. Very exciting times for virtualization, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So much is changing, and I think you're right at the helm of it. Just being able to build an interesting product like Kubermatic, and Kubermatic has been around for in startup times. I think it's been ages because it's it's not like a 1 or 2 year old startup. You guys have been at this since probably the start of Kubernetes. Um, and so you're getting like a front seat to just see how all of this works. Tell us about what it's like being at Kubermatic and what are some of the things that you're involved in, in building, and even a bit about just you before that, just your background and how what got you interested in coming to Kubermatic.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, originally I come from when I started working in the whole IT industry, so to say, I was working, funny enough, with the e-commerce platform, so to say. I had some touch up with telco platforms also after I finished my studies, but the main thing that got me into, let us say, the flow was when I started working on an SAP project called Hybris, which is an omni multi-channel suite platform where you can run different, let us say, e-commerce app at scale. And then I started, moving from one industry to another. And in 2015, 2016, no, I think around 2016, summer 2016, I was first introduced into Kubernetes as an orchestrator for containers. Of course, I used Docker before, but then Kubernetes was big time, and was looking into it. And I started using it even within the organization that I working in. I was part of back then. And after that, based in Hamburg, Germany, there was a store that's being showing day after another. Start hearing about it in the meetup culture that we have here, and which was back then Lutze. So this was the original name for Kubernetes back
Oh,
then,
how
right?
do you spell?
And
I didn't
Lutze.
know
So
that.
it's spelled like Loodse, Lutze, right?
Oh, okay. All right.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was
Yeah.
listening about this new startup. A lot of my company colleagues and friends were talking about, hey, there's a very cool startup that's doing some Kubernetes stuff that you have been mentioning every single now and then. Yeah, I've been to some of their meetings, and then I actually talked at one of their conferences. Container Days is considered one of the massive or biggest Kubernetes slash container specific
Yeah.
conference in Europe. So I spoke
Hmm.
there in one of their talks, and yeah, I think I was hooked. That was back in 2018, and I
Hmm.
started talking to them, and then I started there a few months after,
Hmm.
building software and services on top of Kubernetes. Because then I am really doing what I like. I'm getting into this cloud native, kind of dynamics, which has been privileged so far. And we're talking about 8 years right now. So I've started
Yeah.
there as software engineer, senior, and then tech lead, head of engineering, and eventually VP engineering, which, as I
Hmm.
said, it was huge, like really, really huge step up from my side. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Wow. That's quite a journey. And it's amazing that you spend so much time building at Kubernetes. And like you said, there's been different phases that you've seen the organization and the product go through. Where are you guys at right now? What's on your mind these days? Like what problems are you trying to solve? What gets most of your attention as day to day you work with the product, you're trying to build something here. What keeps you occupied?
So, the main focus of KKP, which is Kubernetes Kubernetes platform, it's our flagship product, so to say. We have other, products, which is Kubernetic Virtualization as well. But, our first baby, so to say, was Kubernetes Kubernetes platform, where we can run multiple clusters at scale. We're talking about hundreds of Kubernetes clusters being managed through hundreds of, or even sometimes in some cases, you might end up with 1,000 nodes. Productivity was part of our DNA. How we can be super productive, how we can be flexible, how we can address big enterprises and service providers' main, let us say, use cases. These were one
Hmm.
of the things, like, or some of the things that we were part of our DNA. We're doing Kubernetes. Kubernetes was built in order to give you the orchestration, in order to give you like a better scale and flexibility. And that's why we have adopted this unique way. And I think we were the first actually to do that, where we were using Kubernetes to run Kubernetes clusters, right? So,
All right.
so we leverage that terrific, let us say, methodology or approach to achieve
Hmm.
scale, productivity. And since we're talking about productivity, the biggest elephant in the room and probably in all rooms is AI. And
Yeah.
AI is also touching up a lot in the cloud native landscape. You have a lot of cool projects that are positioned in the AI
Hmm.
kind of workspace. And that's why nowadays, this is what we mainly are talking also with our customers and potential customers, how we can help, them being productive in platform, in infrastructure, in compliance. So there's something that I have been talking about quite some time right now about, sovereign cloud, sovereign Kubernetes, and sovereign AI.
Right.
And one of the things that people need to think about is, how AI can fit into that, because it's a big topic, right? You have all these large models, you have all these nice tools that's being built somewhere else, and you're trying to run away also from vendor locks. How these things, can
Mhm.
fit into this whole landscape of infrastructure, because apparently infrastructure is one of the most pillars of your productivity. And yeah, these are some of the things that we're currently focusing on.
Yeah, wow, really interesting that productivity, and I think you see it through that lens, all of this, how Kubernetes does infrastructure. Really interesting response there. So I want to come back to that idea of productivity every now and then. But our conversation is going to center around virtualization, and like you mentioned, Kubernetes virtualization is one of your main products, and that's what I wanted to focus on today as well. To set the background for it, tell us about just what it means to run VMs on Kubernetes, what this means for those organizations that need it, what are the use cases, and what's happening right now. Is there anything important right now that's on their minds as they think of virtualization with Kubernetes?
Right. So, to begin with, it's a tough conversation. It's not an easy
Mm,
conversation. And the reason behind that is the mindset, right? So the mindset for tech providers or general, enterprises and service providers is Kubernetes is being built for better deployability. Of course, orchestration. On top of that is stateless. You're building these stateless apps that runs within. I mean, of course, we can run databases as Kubernetes, but people do not have, like, when you are comparing a Kubernetes pod, for example, or a container that lives inside a pod with a virtual machine that a VM could live for years, to come, not just, few minutes to hours to days. Because that's one of the things that, I had to fight at the beginning 6 years ago when the whole project that's called KubeVirt started. We were like fighting this with our customers, trying to change the mindset and change the, let us say, this dogma that, Kubernetes is only for apps, for being HA. No, yes, well, it is. But at the same time, it gives you the ecosystem, it gives you the platform and the stage to run other different things other than apps, right? For example, virtual machines. And these are some of the toughest conversation that we had because, as I said, it's a mindset. And when people think about virtualization, they don't just think about a VM and that's it. No, you think about the ecosystem around the VM, storage, compute resources, security,
mm,
networking. Networking, I spent 2 years, like literally studying and building what could be like an alternative for the known SDNs, so software-defined networks that helps organizations to scale. Because you come
Mhm.
from a different background, so to say. You come from CNI, native networking, into more VRF, fabrics, virtualized network, functions, because you have a lot of vendors that are using VMs, such as telco providers, which is very, very challenging field in terms of VMs, how you can do replacement for that. Telcos,
Mhm.
banking, health sectors. So these are some of the main, let us say, discussions that we have. How can Kubernetes really fit itself as an engine, as a compute engine, to replace the hypervisors that we know, such as Zen, ESXi, or pure KVM. And as I said, you are not just giving them a tool, you are giving them a product, right? This product has a particular enterprise metrics, it has an enterprise support, you need to guarantee some SLAs, and of course, better productivity, and they must be reliable. And that's
Mhm.
exactly, from when you think about cloud native apps, customers did not yet match how this can match, for example, the persistency or the persistence that VMs can give you. This traditional way of handling VMs, because Kubernetes changes the game. It's super declarative. It's the way that it works. It's GitOps proficient. So this is where you need to talk with customers, tell them that, look, we know it's a different technology, but what matters the most is the end result, the conclusion. If I'm giving you an operation that could last and give you the same experience, sometimes better from in terms of operability, production, and
Mhm.
resilience, then maybe you need to invest. Maybe you need to look into that. On top of that, cost. Kubernetes, let us say, I could argue 95% of the Kubernetes ecosystem is built on top of open source, communities. And this already like charge you. Open source has become like, the de facto of any big giga projects. And
Mhm.
if you want to be sovereign, you really need it, because sovereign cloud, sovereign Kubernetes, sovereign AI, sovereignty in general, it's becoming also a big topic that's being discussed on the table, and they
Mhm.
somehow always go hand in hand, right? And yeah, so everyone who's trying to do that, be prepared to being asked about a lot of questions, especially about how you run traditional VMs and how even you can convince the internal teams, not just the management, because eventually the management will talk to their internal teams and trying to get a sense if this is actually sensible or not. The cost is also a major factor that we're going to talk about later. So yeah, there are different factors that need to target. But if you're, very convincing and you can bring with you a very good use case and a very good success story, most of the enterprise and service provider will adopt that. I'm pretty much sure about it.
Yeah. One of the words you mentioned now a couple of times already is sovereign cloud. And we're talking about no lock-in. But something has been happening related to that, which is VMware,
Yeah.
the biggest VM vendor, got acquired by Broadcom. It's been acquired a lot of times, and things changing. And there's been some big changes recently with VMware's pricing. Broadcom's changed it. Tell us a bit about that change, and has it got people worried? Has it got them to think about moving away from VMware? What's happening there?
I mean, look, the acquisition story, it's always alerting for big vendors, right? Whenever there's like an acquisition story coming up, oh, people put their hands on their hearts and it's like, oh, there it goes. Now we need to do a shift and left or left and shift story here. Yeah. I mean, I remember, back in, I'm not now 100% sure, like 2019 or 2020, we were very big on CoreOS. CoreOS was one of the most, let us say, used operating system. We liked it. It's Cube native.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
Yeah.
it was acquired by another vendor. We also like, oh man, no, this is now. Then we have another thing that's called Flatcar. So we are now, very, very familiar with this acquisition game. And of course, it was acquired, and then the prices went staggering, right? Very,
Okay.
very high prices. And then people were looking already about a segue or an exit strategy, right?
Mm.
Because you mentioned the vendor lock-in, you mentioned the sovereign cloud, and this had led like traditional enterprise and traditional vendors to look into the open source even for the first time. We have some customers
Mm.
that we're dealing with, or potential customers, that this is the first time that we look into open source technologies right now. And there were like a lot of good alternatives for let us say VMware by far is of course one of the, let us say, biggest, strongest virtualization provider out there. I mean, let's be honest about it. They
Yeah.
have done a great job. But at the same time,
Mhm.
people need to look at it from a business case. Does it now make sense? Or it does not? Because if I am using first class technology, so to say, but it's not making that much sense from a business strategy or from a business use case for me, then maybe this is not the right place, or maybe this is not the right product that we should go with. And one of the things
Mhm.
that I always keep telling our customers and the people that we have communications with, do not convince yourself or your team that you can just start with a full replacement across all the boards. This is not going to work. The strategy that you need to think about is reducing, the footprint on some of these vendor lock-in providers, for example, VMware, to start then moving into more open source, to be more, shaped by the open source vision, which is no vendor lock-in. You can easily, go back from, for example, different enterprise features into more community features. The vendors must have like a migration path to some degree to you, so they can help you, to move from
Mhm.
any vendor lock-in. Not just that, we're also touching on different, not just the virtualization stack, we're also touching on different parts of their stacks that's already vendor lock-in, and they had some kind of bundle that they bought with their initial subscription. So this is also becoming a very, very big topic for us. Networking is super important, right? When you, for example, buy, I don't know, just for the sake of an example, like vSphere, you also would like to go and get some particular switches with switches operating system that supports, for example, virtualization, that it can work with the whole ecosystem of VMware. Now you are also you have vendor lock-in over there, right? So now you also need to tell the customer how they can have their better exit strategy into something that they can help them in the future. And whenever this acquisition happens to the service provider that it gives you, what would be your strategy right from the start? Don't wait. Cover yourself, but don't wait, because you will never know how the business dynamics is going to hit you. And it might hit you that hard that it will really break your business. So
Mhm.
that's exactly what I'm trying to tell our customers, especially at scales, the one that are run 60, 70,000 vCPUs and hundreds of terabytes of RAM. That
Yeah.
scale isn't that easy to change every single day. Change could take
Mhm.
years up until you find yourself in a sovereign, open source, productive, and reliable ready environment.
Mhm. Wow, interesting. So what options do organizations have if they're looking at moving away from VMware broadly? What would you say are the two or three options that they're looking at?
So, of course, it depends if they would like to go 100% open source, or they would like to go more like, okay, other closed, source vendors, but they can provide you better in terms of cost. For
Hmm.
example, Kubermatic Virtualization is a platform that we built. It was officially started 2 years ago, but our experience, for example, with Kubernetes and the virtualization on top of Kubernetes using the project KubeVirt was 5, 6 years ago. And we
Hmm.
already had actually customers that are using KubeVirt as a virtualization layer, so we know the ecosystem very well, and our product are literally 100% compatible with it. So Kubernetes virtualization, for example, it could be like an open source, help you with sovereignty. Other platform out
Hmm.
there, if you go and take a look, for example, from closed source perspective, we have been hearing a lot about Nutanix, for example. Nutanix
Hmm.
is used also as an hypervisor, who is promoting themselves also as an alternative, as a, like, let us say, a Nutanix has been here also for a long time. So this could be closed source. Another open source, platform that we had also some discussion with, and we did even a workshop with them in KubeCon Amsterdam, is, for example, SUSE virtualization. So
Sorry, which one is that?
SUSE for
Al-
virtualization, SUSE.
Azusa.
Yeah, exactly. So
Okay.
these are also some alternatives. Another thing, of course, if you want to go vanilla, then you can only run KubeVirt on top of Cube. But then of course you need to build a lot of things, tweak your ecosystem yourself.
Hmm.
Then you have to bring your own stack and build it on top. So these are some of the let us say virtualization platforms that out there. As I said, some of them are closed source, such as Nutanix. Other of them are 100% open source, such as Kubernetes Virtualization.
Mm, all right, all right. How would you make a decision between these, whether to go open source, whether to go closed? Which one is the right fit for me? How would you think through that?
This really depends 100% on your main business logic and how much you're willing to invest in terms of, for the future, right? So
Mhm.
you might have, for example, some scenarios where you can start already with open source because that business logic is not, let us say, super, super critical. You can, for example, we talk with Swisscom, which is one of our company with one of our customers, and we started for them, for example, internally. Like they had a lot of teams that they had a very big footprint on VMware. And those guys, they were like, okay, let's start with them because then it's easy for us to do lift and shift. It's easy for us to, if there was some, lack of performance, lack of whatever, it's easier for them to mitigate because it's internal. So the processes are different. So
Mhm.
exactly. So we started with them as an experiment. Some of their internal teams like really started using Kubernetes virtualization in general to see, for example, how good, or let us say how the replacement would be rolled out. So this would be one strategy, like using your the platform itself on open source internally, try to test, try to validate, benchmark, running in internal production ready environment. Yeah, they're internal, but still they're production ready, right? They're serving thousands of employees. So it's not something that an easy, let us say, also to replace. And from there, you gain confidence. You start seeing really more and more use cases are being now covered. Some of the use cases that we're also trying to do is traditional telco stack that are well known of running, for example, on VMware, Nutanix, or other hypervisors. Now we're also targeting that, and we already have a use case where we can run the telco stack inside, like telco core, for example, inside Cube and inside Kubernetic virtualization. So this would be the first journey. You have then the other journey that, such as small service providers or enterprises. For them, of course, it will take a leap of faith because they're VMware guys, right? They have been doing that for a long time. It's a learning scale. And for them, for example, the experience was also very, let us say, fluent. They started the platform, they run it as a staging. They really saw that the difference is not that big, especially if you are very big on Linux. Let us say if you're running a Linux operating system a lot, the let us say the migration or the shift or lift and shift process is actually way simpler because it's well known that we have been using Linux for a long time with Kubernetes and with KubeVirt in general. For Windows use case, we also support Windows. You can run virtual machines that are using Windows. But what we saw at the beginning, people were not that confident of using that. But now we have also a few customers that they started even rolling out Windows machines on top of the VMs. And it depends on what they're really doing with Windows as well, right? You might purchase some service like, a security service or whatever that runs on top of Windows that might not be very compatible with KVM because by the end of the day, every single thing is KVM in KubeVirt, right? So we try to study what you are going to run on these VMs. And I can argue currently 60 to 78% of the use cases that we have are already can right away start on with KubeV, so Kubernetes Virtualization. Others, they need to be more investigated studies because you have other vendors, that are there in the game, that vendor stack, that are 100% compatible with VMware. They expect when you run them that they will connect, for example, to a vCenter or to a E6i server. So this is exactly where we're trying to be very careful and at the same time confident of what strategy we should adopt.
Mhm, mhm. It's interesting that you mentioned that many of your customers find it seamless and comfortable when they move from VMware, and one of the reasons is that you use Linux, as the OS. What are some other things that you built into your product to make it seamless so that people coming from VMware, it feels like home for them? Give us some maybe one or two more examples of that.
Absolutely. So when you talk with Kubernetes guys, and you tell them, how do you interact with Kubernetes in general? They'll tell you, well, I pop up my prompt, I go with kubectl and start through doing things, right? kubectl, good nodes, git pods,
Mhm,
whatever. If I would like to, upgrade my game a little bit, I go to my, orchestrator such as Argo CD or Flux CD and start,
mhm,
rolling out using, for example, their APIs or dashboard. This was
mhm,
never the case with VMware, literally. Like people who are coming from a VMware background, they literally do not. I mean, some of them they do use some CLI tooling, but I could argue 95% to 99 even percent, they would go to vCenter dot blah 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 they go into the UI, and then from the UI, they start building their VMs, building their networking, taking snapshots. So the VMware, let us say, or the people who are coming from VMware background, they're very heavy on dashboards and UIs, right? And I don't blame them. I mean, of course, why not? I mean, if I can be very
Mm.
convenient of using dashboards and UIs, that's completely fine. So this is one of the things that I noticed right from the start.
Yeah.
When I always spoke with customer, they would always go to the
Mm.
UI, and I was like, we need to build a proper UI because Kubernetes guys, they don't care about UI. I mean, I don't remember even when the last time I took a look at the Kubernetes dashboard that's being deprecated at the moment. But yeah, so the UI was a huge important when it comes to operations. And on top of that, what if I can give you as
Mm-hmm.
well, on top of this UI, a better GitOps, GitOps stages, GitOps approaches and operations that you can use to be still productive? Because remember, productivity is part of our DNA and we want you to be productive. So the UI was very important to let people coming from, VMware. So that's because the first encounter that they can see, oh, I have a dashboard, I can create VMs, I can create networks, I can create VM pools, I can control the resources with the dashboards, also credentials. So the dashboard, looking at it clean, very, let us say, responsive. It really touches what they know. VM pools, I know it already, or resource pools, I know all these things. So giving them first the nice look and feel. So this was the first thing, because if I see that, yeah, there's a dashboard, that's pretty wonderful. We're talking about product, yeah? The other thing, of
Yeah.
course, is they're coming from subnets or from a networking perspective. I don't want to dig deep into that, but
Mm.
for them, they know that I have a network. Then let's give them a network, similar to how you do it, like VLANs, giving them port groups. Let us give them that. Connecting these VMs into this networking. Let's also give them that. Okay, I'm using NSX. How about fabrics? How about NAT gateways? I use that all the time. Let's give them that. Let's give them something similar to VPCs and subnets, so that they feel, okay, yeah, I moved from VMware into this new platform, Kubermatic Virtualization, but I'm being abstracted, right? The things that I used to do, they look exactly the same here, right? In a way that I know this. I look at it, I know what is a VM pool, I know what is a VM, I know what is a subnet or a network in general. Because don't forget,
Mm.
VMware isn't just about vSphere or vCenter. You have pure ESXi. I don't know if somebody is using that, but maybe. You have also VMware Cloud Director, which is for VMware at scale. And we try to position ourselves in a sweet spot where we can, govern, or let us say have an umbrella for all these different products that VMware put on the table, and where you
Mm.
can manage it from one place, from one single pane of glass where you can do it, right? Where platform folks and also software engineers who are interested in creating VMs can still dig into that. So this isn't from the look and feel side. Of course, from a network perspective, they know, for example, VXLAN. Now we're talking about really, really deep stack for people, for integrators, right? We gave them
Mm.
also an integration path. How do you install the platform? Is very important. Is my journey really easy, or I'm gonna spend like 3 or 4 or 5 days only setting up my first server? We give them also the
Mm.
way to provision Kubernetes virtualization in a very simple style. All what you need to do is having an SSH key added to a server. If you don't have that, fine. You want to do it over network net boot, let's do it over net boot. We start the provisioner. It talks to the network over Bixby. If you have no operating system, you can then provision operating system, and then we start installing our stack. Let us say that, you know what, I am not a guy who would like to do it imperative style, like, doing CLI and next, next, next. All right, let's do it declaratively. We give you a configuration file. In that configuration file, it's a blueprint. You define how your infrastructure look like. You pipe it into the binary or the installer, and the installer will take care of that, of setting up your server. Other thing is provisioning or extending more and more services. It's very flawless. All what you need to do, just Bixby booting another server, the provisioner will take over and add this new node into the whole Kubernetes virtualization cluster. It's Kubernetes, that's the beauty of it. Kubernetes gives you that flexibility
Mm.
underneath the hood. And this is exactly when you tell these things to those folks, they would really know that, okay, yeah, that sounds very familiar. I said, yeah, exactly. That sounds very
Mm.
familiar. The only thing that you need to change a little bit is be more open to creating APIs, GitOps, this reconciliation part, where we are shaping, system administrators, instead of being machine mechanics, into a real system architects, where they really define how their system should look like, how their their environment infrastructure should be look like. They declare it in a declarative style, and then Cube will take over and always get you into this desired state.
Mm-hmm. All right, all right. Demo time. I was wondering if you could share a screen and give us a little peek into what Kubernetes virtualization looks like.
Terrific. So what you see over here is, generally speaking, our dashboard, where we give like a very quick look into, for example, how many nodes this cluster have, how many virtual machines are currently running, and volumes. So how many volumes are also attached to some of these virtual machines, in addition to how many available CPUs, RAM, and storage in terms of disk storage. Of course, scaling pools. In addition to that, we have instance types. This is like an instance flavors. With instance flavors, you can decide very quickly that I would like to run, for example, a VM with 2 vCPUs and 4 gigs of RAM. And last but not least, you can also, for example, go to load balancers if you would like to expose particular VMs under a particular load balancer. Of course, with the start, the first thing that you can see is the virtual machine itself. What you need to do is just new virtual machine. So you click on it, and then you will end up over here in some information, like what is the name of the VM that you would like to create, in which namespace, because by the end of the day, it's Kubernetes, so you can define, for example, in which namespace this VM could be residing. We're also changing some of the stuff for this in the future. It will be in the upcoming releases, where more and more multi-tenancy approaches will be there. So in here, for example, instead of namespace, it will hide, and it will hide all these details for you, and there will be like isolation from a Kubernetes point of view. Over here, you can, for example, also decide on which server you would like to run the VM, or you can choose auto select, where Kubernetes decide, for example, based on resources, what is the proper node where you can run the VM on top. Next to that, you can have some meta information such as labels and annotations, because these are, again, Kubernetes resources. In addition to that, if you don't want to do any of this, you can, for example, also pick a virtual machine type. So here you have some instance types like flavors, like if you're coming from the cloud. There's, for example, in AWS, something called, X large or C medium or whatever. So we did something similar where you can introduce your own custom instance types. So for example, we can choose this one. Here you can also, if you have any GPU attached hosts, you can also attach GPUs into this VM. And if you would like to do custom, for example, one socket, memory GPU, yada, yada, yada. Next to that, you have here a disk. If you would like to attach some disks to the VM, define how big this disk that's being attached to the VM is. And of course, here you have networking, where you're going to attach this particular VM. We have something called VPCs. So for example, you can choose this VPC, and you can choose this particular subnet. So once that VM is being up and running, it will be part of this virtual private cloud, in addition to having an IP address from that subnet. And last, of course, you can add as many NIC as you want. Last but not least, of course, you can decide whether if you would like to use Cloudinor or not. And if you would like to attach an SSH key or authenticate using username and password. Once you create that particular VM, you will end up to a VM just like this one here, for example. So you get some overlook about the VM. You can also decide if you would like to start or stop it, or edit the VM configs. Here you can see some also quick outlook about the NICs, the disks. And of course, if you would like to jump into the VM right away, you can, for example, here VNC, or have a direct console into the VM, or you would like to log in with username and password, and you will be then inside the VM. Very quickly next to it, then you have here VM pools. You can decide pools, like how many VM you would like to run. You can think of it as a VM template. Next to it, you can also define some auto-scaling rule, where you could say, like, based on particular metrics, you can scale VMs up and down. A very quick outlook also into the nodes that they are running, and some data about the nodes, like, what is this node? Bunch of information about the server itself. Here you can define your instance types. And, here you can add also data volume. You can add also here images where you can start your operating system from. So you can attach this image into the VM, and the VM will launch that as an operating system. VPCs, here you can create virtual private cloud. So if we can here, you can give it a name. And then of course, subnets. With the subnets, you can decide, you can give the name also you can give, a subnet that's going to be part of the VPC. And then you can use that subnet to allocate IPs from that VM. Last but not least, you have load balancers. With load balancers, of course, you can expose, for example, you can decide what is the VM, so a name for a load balancer, what is the VM that you would like to expose, and then what are the ports that are going to be exposed on top of that VM. Once you do that, this VM will be exposed then. And of course, you can add firewall rules based on network policies into these VMs. So in theory, this is how Kubernetes Virtualization Dashboard look like. If you have any questions, would be very happy to answer them.
Yeah. No, really interesting. I think it really brings it all together, what you were just talking about, which is it's kind of the best of both worlds to me. You get like the VMware experience and the power of Kubernetes both in one package. And I think that's really cool about this. So it feels very familiar, the UI,
Exactly.
and still you've got a lot of those little things that you added here and there that kind of reveal, the Kubernetes layer underneath, and things that it's possible with that. So yeah, really interesting product here, and I think for someone considering a move away from VMware, really this is something they should be considering. Um, I want to ask about migration. Do you have a migration tool? Do you have it as a service that you provide? Like, tell us a bit about migrating from VMware to Kubernetes virtualization.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we started when we actually wanted to do, the whole migration story, or let us say the whole VMs are running particularly on VMware, and I would like now to lift it and shift it into this new platform over here. So
Yeah.
there used to be like in MTV. This is the migration toolkit for virtualization, and there's also another project that's called Forklift that helps you a lot with migrating from VMware into, for example, Kubernetes or KubeVirt in general. And we built our migration plan or migration tooling on top of that, where you need, for example, to point this tool into your vCenter, and from there you can decide which VM that you would like to move it from vSphere into the Kubernetes Virtualization cluster. In the next release of KubeV, there will be like here next to this VM, there will be something called import VM. And from the import VM, there will be like inside the admin panel, you can go there and configure a particular configuration. For example, the vCenter, if there is a Bastion host between you and the vCenter or VPN, all these things will be like in one place where you can, bundle the planning of this migration of that VM. In addition to that, one of the things that we get a lot of our customers is, well, talking about migration, what about the network? The network. Do you also migrate network? Storage is easy. You create a snapshot, or you keep creating snapshots from the VM, and then once it's moved, all the snapshot or the storage being over there. What about the IP address? Do I get to keep the IP? We tell them, of course, you can get to keep the IP. Most of the time, when you're creating VMs and networks in VMware, you define your own range. If you are connected with a VLAN, then you are dictated by that VLAN. Here in KubeV, as we already said, you can, for example, come over here, create yourself your own VPC. And inside this particular VPC, you can add your own subnets that matches the IP address that matches the subnet that this VM IP is coming from. And since all this subnet here can be actually overlaid, meaning that if I create two VPCs, I can, for example, have the exact same subnet lives in across the two VPCs. I can have VPC 1, 10.10.0.0/24. The exact same subnet could be on the second VPC, 10.10.0. So this is super important, and it was a game changer because usually you don't have that high network isolation. Here we have it. On top of that, we also support BGP and BFT, meaning if you have a load balancer, or let us say you have like an uplink topology that your VMware is talking to, you can easily let the BGP peer in Kubernetes virtualization speak with that BGP that VMware is talking to, under NSX. So if NSX it's talking through BGP to the next peer, then what happen is Kubernetes virtualization could also start its BGP session and speak under that session to the BGP peer that lives into the uplink topology that gets you the traffic in. And at the same time, you can also control how ingress and egress traffic would look like. If you would like your ingress traffic to come from BGP1 and the egress going through BGP2 or through the second network, you can also do that with Kubernetes virtualization. Networking was one of the most important, component that we worked on a lot in order to achieve this nice, let us say, migration path for our customers.
Wow, wow. Yeah, that's a lot of work and a lot of details that you've gone into. Yeah, that was really fascinating, the demo that you showed us as well. Um, yeah, to wind down, I just wanted to ask about just the year ahead, where you see what you see happening in the space of virtualization and how you see it changing. And it's nice that, we've had a conversation, a whole conversation with no mention of AI for for a change. That's really nice that we've gone back to talking about solving, problems with IT infrastructure that are not about just AI. And it was really a really interesting chat. But I wanted to just get your thoughts finally as we close on this. Where do you see virtualization headed? Where do you see the KubeVirt project headed? What excites you? What do you read up on? What are you keeping track of?
I mean, we have to know something very important when it comes to, to open source technology at the beginning. I mean, we know that virtualization have been here for a long time, like really, really long time. A lot of companies were using it like since I think 80s or even before that. So the idea of virtualization is there. Now, the world is changing, right? And there are new technologies that are being over here. There are some virtualization stack that exactly match up your business case. For example, if you're running, and this is a very important use case, Edge, for example, right? The idea that we have about virtualization, it's a very tough and hard stack that comes in. You need a lot of resources in order to revive it, or let's say to run it. You need a very, let us say, good resources to make sure that your experience is very fluent and very smooth. This is changing, by the way. This is changing a lot. Now we are talking about running VMs on top of edge devices, and we have a customer that we're actually doing that at their side. We're running VMs and virtual machines on their edge devices to make sure that, I mean, Kubernetes help you with that. Kubernetes is it has a great selling point for edge environments, not
Wow.
just for HPC and virtual private cloud, definitely. And that's why you have these edge devices. They would like to make sure that they're compatible with whatever fabric they used to run. I was like, awesome, you could use containers as it is. At the same time, you can also use traditional VMs. We are basing our software on top of KubeVirt, which is an open source project that is not only being, I mean, back in the days, it was completely, being developed and pushed through one single vendor. Right now, you have a huge list of players in the market, also in the whole community, which are also pushing into KubeVirt. It's not a single vendor anymore. It's being an interest for a lot of big deployers and tech makers. Take a look, for example, at what we are seeing every single now and then with NVIDIA. NVIDIA has released like a full documentation about how you can run GPUs on top of Kubernetes and GPUs on top of KubeVirt. The documentation shows you exactly if you're running, for example, KubeVirt, these are the configurations that you need to do, and this already should give you a signal that this thing is big and this thing is here to stay. It's not just something that you play with just for experience. No, this thing here is getting GPUs and RAM, which is now one of the most expensive resources. And you have to be careful about what's going to run on top. Already gives you an idea that, virtualization isn't just now running a VMs and call it a day. It's a whole ecosystem. It's built on top of course, it's now open to open source, open to this AI workload. And the idea of running both, right? Traditional VMs side by containers, it's already a game changer. It's already something that would let you explore how virtualization could also look like in the future in terms of, for example, how you can virtualize apps, different functions in terms of AI. So this is where I see this like more and more integrations between VMs or the traditional virtualization stack that we know it with Kubernetes. And I believe that Kubernetes will make as the control plane and the engine and the pusher for AI workloads, for example, into these traditional VM layers.
Wow, that's amazing. You have a great way of just explaining a lot of these concepts and really, tapping into the pulse of what's happening and explaining it really well as well.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Moat, for joining us today. It was really a pleasure chatting with you about all things virtualization. Quite an insightful conversation. Yeah, with that, we come to the end of this chat, but we hope to have you back sometime next year again. Maybe we'll get in touch with you. But it was a real pleasure chatting with you today.
Absolutely. Same here. Glad to be back. Whenever, there's a new thing about virtualization, Kubernetes, and sovereign AI, would also be a pleasure for me to be here.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. All right. Thanks to all of our listeners and viewers for tuning in as well. We hope you enjoyed this conversation. And if this is on your mind, definitely get in touch with them. If you're working with virtual machines, VMware, thinking of a move, thinking of modernizing how you manage VMs, Kubermatic is a great place to be. You got a little glimpse of what's possible with Kubermatic virtualization. Head over to their website and find out more. Ask them for a demo and definitely check it out. It looks like a really cool product that's built on KubeVirt. And with that, we'll see you on the next episode. Do join us then. See you. Bye bye.